That's 10 o'clock, Premier Chair.
Thank you, Jade. Morning all. May I welcome all members and officers to the hybrid meeting of Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting has concluded, and should anyone else also wish to view it. Please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed only for the purpose of producing the minutes. The transcript will be deleted once the committee approves the minutes, and it should not be downloaded by anyone other than Democratic Services. To confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notifications or requests to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when they wish to speak. And please could you also keep your microphones muted when not talking, so there aren't any interruptions encountered. I also remind members that as per the statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011, and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending the meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask all to please use your cameras for the duration of this meeting. Moving on to the agenda. Could Jade, our Democratic Services Officer, confirm if we have received any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. No apologies.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I'll go through the list. Can I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest? Councillor Best, I can't see. Councillor Cowles?
Governor at Blenavon Heritage School, a governor at Aberystwyth Comprehensive School, and I've got a brother also at Aberystwyth Comprehensive School.
Councillor Cowles? Councillor Cunningham?
Governor St Albans High School.
Victoria Hawler?
Parent Governor Yscol Panteg.
Councillor Janet Jones?
Governor at Blenavon Heritage School and a grandson at Aberystwyth Com.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Jones?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Keats?
Nothing for me except for a grandson in Crossy School and a granddaughter in Rougemont School.
Thank you. I have children in Blenheim Road and Coeddiv, great-grandchildren in Blenheim Road and Coeddiv School, and I have a grandson in Yscol Gymraeg, YYG. I can never remember the new name of it. So, and I'm also on the management committee of the PRU. So, Councillor Simons?
Yeah, wife works in George Street Primary.
Councillor Thomas?
I'm a governor at Nant Celyn School and I have a grandson at Combran High.
Thank you. And Councillor Watkins?
I'm a governor at Our Lady of the Angels, Roman Catholic Primary School and Combran High School.
Thank you very much all. That takes us to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2025. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the report we received on the additional learning needs transformation. Members, do you approve these minutes as an accurate record? Thank you. Takes us to agenda item 4, action sheet. And can I ask Geraint, I think there's one on there, Geraint, that you might want to mention on the action sheet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to let members know, obviously, as you can see from the first two, they've been addressed. It's just the third one. I know colleagues from education are chasing colleagues from health for that information. So as soon as we get anything through, I'll forward that straight on to the committee.
Thank you very much for that. That takes us to agenda item 5, which is the mid-year review of the work programme. Geraint, can you please take us through this report, please?
Thanks again, Chair. Good morning, members. Item 5 is a short report to give members the opportunity to review your work programme for the remainder of the scrutiny year. You'll see from the appendices to the report you've been provided with a condensed feeder pack containing up-to-date information from the current work programme, the Executive Forward Plan, Governance and Audit referrals, the Risk Register and performance information including progress against the County Plan Delivery Plan relevant to this committee. Can I highlight to members, this is not an opportunity to scrutinise individual items contained within the feeders or the performance information, but rather offers the opportunity to pose questions to officers where you may identify potential issues within this information that may warrant a reprioritisation of items for the remaining 2 committee meetings. You'll see from the work programme selected at Visioning, the items selected for the remaining 2 meetings are learner progression and school catering. So if I can ask members if you've got any questions or concerns you'd like to raise from within the additional feeder information or the performance details, please.
Any questions from anyone? Councillor
As
Janet
Chair.
Jones.
Chair, I'm not sure if it's the right time, but regarding the proposal to create a new Welsh medium ALN learning resource base, that was due to be April 2026. Do we have any information on how progress is, please, Chair?
Andrew?
Yeah, morning, everyone. Morning, Councillor Jones. So we're currently in consultation with the public around the opening of the resource base at Gwynsw. So that would be for September 2026. We've just completed the review of applications for a specialist placement, and there are learners that are eligible for that base. So the consultation is due to end in about a month. We're hoping it will just proceed as planned and the base will open in September.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. That's really good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'd just like to ask officers if there's any other priorities that might have overtaken our work programme or not, or is it on schedule? Okay, thank you. Councillor Watkins, sorry.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that we're still looking for a date for provisions and outcomes of children who are looked after. We're still trying to find a date to slot that in. It just says date. I know it was postponed. It just says date to be confirmed.
Yeah, I think that when we worked through that, there were some difficulties and challenges in actually pulling the data together for it. I think in terms of, Andrew may want to come in here, but in terms of a future date, I think we'd be faced with the same issues again. I am keen that we do something to really show any differential between, I guess, looked after children and children who aren't looked after within the education system. But I think we are going to be presented with challenges for at least the foreseeable future. Am I correct with that, Andrew?
Yes, so the data that you've been presented with today for Key Stage 4 outcomes doesn't exist in the same way to compare looked after children against the wider population. So the way we do that is through looking at individual progress against personal education plans. So it would be a real challenge to present that in a meaningful way to members. Jason and I did talk, this may be worth a member seminar, so because it's quite a nuanced piece of work.
I'm anticipating what we will be able to do, or what I hope we'll be able to do, because we've developed the new PET process, or that's in the processes of being developed. We'll be able to look at sort of distance travel for children looked after. So I'm hoping that perhaps next year we may be able to put something on through Visioning as a priority area next year, albeit it may have a slightly different or slightly nuanced title to it. But it's certainly something, you know, I want to keep an eye on that from a strategic level to make sure that we are achieving the best possible outcomes for our children looked after. What we also have, of course, though, is through the Corporate Parenting Board, there are elements that are reported through there on a fairly regular basis, just around outcomes for children looked after, but aren't necessarily compared against children who aren't looked after. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Yeah, so it is. So work is being done, but it's probably difficult to put it in a way that deserves a scrutiny session. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you, officers. That takes us to agenda item 6, which is the Local Authorities School Improvement Service, now called LACES, and summer outcomes. The purpose of this report is to outline the delivery of the school improvement services in Torfaen and National School Improvement Provision commissioned by Welsh Government. The report also provides an analysis of the summer 2025 exam outcomes within Torfaen. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome the Executive Member, Councillor Richard Clark, and officers to the meeting. Could we quickly go around the table for everyone to introduce themselves, please? I'll start off. My name is Councillor Rosemary Seaborn. I'm the Chair of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Geraint Thomas, Scrutiny Officer.
Councillor Jane Watkins.
Over this thing. John Cunningham, Co-Optee.
Colette Thomas, Councillor.
Victoria Hall, Co-opted Parent Governor Representative for Welsh Medium.
Liam Cowles, Councillor.
Karen Scott.
And Councillor John Jones. Sorry, Colette.
Sorry, Janet. We go around the table first. I'll come on screen now.
Yeah, fine.
Sorry, Chair. Karen Scott Woodhouse, Principal School Improvement Partner, working with LACES.
Ed Price, Assistant Director with LACES.
Jason O'Brien, Strategic Director, Children and Family Services.
Good morning, everyone. Andy Rothwell, Head of Learning and Achievement in the Local Authority.
We have Rebecca sat in the front row there. We'll go on screen now. Councillor Janet Jones, do you want to start off?
I'm Councillor John Jones.
Thank you. Nick?
Nicholas Simons, Councillor.
Stuart?
Stuart Keats, Councillor.
Mark?
Yes, Mark Jones, Councillor Pontoval.
Andrew?
Andrew Powell, Director of Education.
Richard?
Richard Clark, Executive Member for Children, Families and Education.
Thank you very much. We also have Mr Hall sat at the table, who's a member of the public and is going to ask a question today. So, on behalf of the committee, may I thank the head teachers, governors, staff and pupils of Ganteg Primary School. That was an excellent visit. And Our Lady of the Angels Roman Catholic School for our very informative recent visits, which have proved really useful in preparing for today's meeting. Members have all read the report, so we will head straight into questions unless anyone would like to make an introductory comment. Any officers wait? No? Okay. Before we head into members' questions, I'm pleased to confirm that we have a question from a member of the public today, and I'd like to invite Mr Craig Hall to join us, which he has, from the public gallery. May I invite members may I invite Mr Hall to ask his question?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I would like to ask that what is being done to support children with ALN and currently at home and not in schools?
Good morning. Nice to meet you. Yeah, good question. So I think there's quite a bit really that's been done in both those worlds. So maybe I'll do ALN first, and then we'll talk about home education. I think there's probably a place here as well for colleague Karen to talk about some of the work that we do to support free school meal children, because there's often a link between those elements as well. So in terms of ALN, first and foremost, the support starts in school. So there'll be a role for the school in terms of identifying a particular need. Now, it might be that it's an emerging need, where there isn't a specific ALN identified, an additional learning need. It might just be that a child needs some differentiated work in the classroom, or it might be that there is something that's just a little bit different, but not significantly different. So we call that an emerging need. And quite often, in fact, more often than not, that is the thing that enables the child to make progress in school. But that's primarily delivered at a school level. Now, sometimes those needs are a little bit greater, and we have to, schools have to consider looking at something that's more than a small little tweak, as it were. So that's when a school might consider starting the sort of the more formal ALN process, so the additional learning needs process, trying to not use too many acronyms today. And with that, that's very dependent on the child's or learner's specific need. So if it might be to do with accessing the curriculum, it could be that there is some additional support and possibly funding put in to enable the access to the curriculum. If the needs are more profound, or maybe in a different area, perhaps to do with the physical environment, adaptations to the physical environment can be made. That process then follows what is the ALN code. So within that, the school will monitor if there's an IDP, an individual development plan in place. The school will monitor that development plan over the course of a year. Obviously, parents are involved in the monitoring that as well, along with colleagues from the local authority. And then it's just ensuring that the child's making progress then within that. I don't know if, before I come on to the home educated bit, I don't know if there's something that you want to add in around anything else there, Karen, because I know you've
just to say, yeah, absolutely, that every school has to have an Elenco, an additional needs coordinator. They are now usually members of the senior leadership team, which means they have a great deal of knowledge and experience. Regular network meetings that take place in the local authority to make sure that actually they are meeting the needs of their children in school. All schools now offer a universal and a targeted and intensive support programme for their children, and actually in schools teachers know their children very, very well, and they will know the level of those needs. Where you've got children perhaps who are accessing a little bit more of the curriculum or a little bit more support than others, then they would have things called a one-page profile, and by default then parents are automatically involved and included in making sure that those children have very, very small step targets, and that progress towards those targets is carefully monitored. And if progress isn't being made, then obviously they will look at what the issues are and make sure that they've got any additional support.
Just to build on that then, so we obviously monitor that as a local authority. We've got a vested interest through Scrutiny to hold us to account to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing. But we also get external eyes looking at what schools are doing, so that comes through Estyn, who are the Schools Inspectorate for Wales. So over the course of the last 3 years, they've visited just over half of our schools, that's primary and secondary schools. Those Estyn reports are obviously publicly available, you can read them, but they'll talk in there about the provision that's made for all learners in schools. Just picking through a couple of schools, so I mean, most recently you might have seen in the Argus, George Street was visited. It made some very nice comments there about the provision and what the school were doing to support their Gypsy Roma traveller community, but also all learners within the school community. Similarly with Comfortdoor, Cross Killiog Comp actually had a case study which is quite a unique thing for Estyn to recognise that a school is doing something very, very impressive. And that was around the culture of the school and how the school was supporting all learners in the school. And it goes on. We've seen through, I mean, Glanteg, you just mentioned that you visited there. Theirs was in the summer. They equally had a very similar response in terms of what Estyn saw in the school about an inclusive community. We haven't seen any school in Torvine in the 3 years that I've been here with Karen have a recommendation linked to an issue with ALN or inclusion or inclusivity. So that's really positive. The the home educated bit as well. So yeah, parents are able to decide if they want to electively home educate a child or their child. That's an instruction to school. Ideally, we want to talk to parents before we reach that point, so we encourage schools to work with parents to see what the issue might be as to why a child might choose to become electively home educated. And then once that's happened, we've got an elective home educated officer who will then work with the school and the parent to, again, just help parents understand what the decision is, and then to work with parents to develop an education plan that parents then deliver at home. But that becomes the parent's choice. That's not a local authority decision.
Okay. Do you have a supplementary on the information that you've been given, Mr. Hall?
Yes, I do. ALN is quite very close to heart with me. Okay? Obviously, you will see that there's a child here today, sat in the public gallery, who has actually been off school for 11 months. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, okay. But he has been at home. I'm not dictating who it is. Oh, yeah, and all that. With no guide or support, what is the local authority doing to support individual children who are actually sat at home and not in school?
So, as mentioned, where a parent's choosing to electively home educate a parent, that's the parent's right, and we fully respect that. We have a responsibility as a local authority to work with the parent on an annual basis to review the education plan that a parent's chosen to put in place. But our jurisdiction, as it were, doesn't really go beyond that. We do have a responsibility as a local authority to safeguard the element of a child when they're at home. So I don't know, Jason, if you want to come in and mention or talk about any of that element.
I wasn't going to reference safeguard, but what I was going to say is if any parent is dissatisfied about the service that the local authority is providing, then there are a couple of options for them then in terms of, I guess, complaints processes, complaints procedures, both within the local authority if they feel that the local authority isn't adhering to their duties, but also the complaints process through the school and the governing body within the school as well. What I would also point to any parent then, if they were experiencing any issues like that, would be there's an advocacy service, Snap Cymru, and any parent that were experiencing any issues that they were dissatisfied with, to approach Snap Cymru to provide that independent advocacy. You know, and they can be very, very strong for parents in that process as well. So just wanted to reference that really in terms of that broader, you know, any parents going through that experience, that those options would be available for them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Hall. Thank you for coming this morning. You're our first public question at the Education Zone. Very welcome. Thank you.
I ask the officers, when they're speaking, put the microphones near them, because I can't hear a word at the back here. I mean, Andy, you was 2 miles away then. I couldn't hear you at all.
Apologies for that. Are you okay?
I'm all right as long as they use the microphone and they're facing me, but when they're turning away and it's a long way away from where they're speaking, it's difficult.
Thank you very much, Mr Cunningham. Can I invite members now to go into their questions? Let me take my sheet. First question is relating to 4.1 and 4.3 of the report. Members appreciate that the new setup is at an infancy, but can we be assured that LACE's support is not only being delivered, but is functioning effectively, and how are we monitoring this?
I think probably the most important test there is... Can you hear me okay? The most important test there is probably when you visited schools and you've spoken to schools about the support they're getting, to make sure that actually for them they're getting what they need. In terms of continuity, I don't believe, and again we take feedback from heads around this, we don't think that there's been any change in any of the support. It has just continued for our schools in Torwine. We've been really happy with the partnership that we've developed over the past 3 years. That good work has continued, and I don't think there's been any lag or shift or change in that. But I'd welcome your views, and obviously you've had the school's views. And then the second bit of that, in terms of quality assurance. So the quality assurance activities that, again, we put in place 3 years ago as part of our Eston improvement journey, none of those have stopped. In many instances, those have continued. And that's a partnership approach, and the use of things like the school improvement group and head teacher strategy groups have been added to those, have been added to enhance the quality assurance process. But those activities have continued, and they get fed back through regular reports to our leadership team, but also to Councillor Clark in terms of executive briefings. So, yeah, we're confident there. Ed and Karen, I don't know if it was...
Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of formal governance, so LACES, or EAS, as it's legally known, is a limited company. So there does exist a formal board. So that consists of elected members, Director of Education, and one Chief Executive currently, and that's the Chief Executive of Newport City Council. So there's formal monitoring of the effectiveness of the company through that. There's also a layer that we call the Joint Executive Group, JEG. So that's the cabinet members for education across the region, and a director of education also attend that. So that's got a governance and also steer on the work of LACES. So that's from a company perspective. In terms of the work within individual local authorities, we have the Continued Improvement Group that meets quarterly, which is chaired by Jason. So the standing agenda item in there is always about school improvement, and we'd review, for example, the standards report that's Appendix C within your pack. We would look at ESTIN outcomes, and we would look at other forms of evaluation that have taken place. Between this and the last meeting, you would have received the cluster thematic review. That was also completed by LACIS. So we have an in-depth discussion about those evaluations. There's also work where we look at ESTIN outcomes for schools, and we look at learner outcomes in schools. So we're making sure that the local authority and the school improvement service are operating in tandem to best support schools based on their specific need. So that is monitored each half term. We also take feedback from schools where things are not working well. Within January, we met with, it was all Director of Education, it was senior staff within LACIS, and it was head teachers from across the region. This was a session facilitated by Professor Steve Mumby, and it was to consider how we are addressing the recommendations from the middle tier review from Welsh Government. So as a result of that, there's been some recommendations that are drafted, and LACIS have developed an action plan that over the next half term we'll share with head teachers. So I guess my key point is I want to reassure you there's formal governance of the limited company, plus there's extensive monitoring of the outcomes of learners and the effectiveness of the support that's being provided in a really holistic way, and it's at least half term that this monitoring takes place.
Thank you, Andrew.
I was just going to add very briefly, rather than repeating what officers have said, but from our perspective, relationships are very strong. They haven't been impacted in any way in these changes in the way in which we work, but also, as Andrew alluded to, accountability arrangements are strong and robust, but they are not standing still, hence the mention of the Steve Mumby review, where we are looking and having that external view so that in partnership we work and move forward together with a clear action plan, which is developed from that work. So positive from our perspective, but not resting on laurels in any way whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you. Any supplementary from anyone? Thank you. Question 2 is from Councillor Mark Jones.
Hi, good morning. This is relevant to paragraph 4.2. The report confirms that Caerphilly is currently only commissioning aspects of professional learning. Are there any timeframes attached to this, and are there any risks if they stop commissioning this, please?
Ed?
I'm thinking of the timescales now. We have a commitment of at least another 2 years for Caerphilly to be embedded within the professional learning service. It is not a small aspect of our work. It's quite a large aspect of our work with schools in Torfaen as well. Yes, of course, there are risks to them potentially withdrawing from that element of the service, but we know we have mechanisms for resizing the organisation appropriately to service the needs of the schools that we will continue to service, and we've got a successful examples of that in the last year. So whilst, of course, a risk, there are methods that can be undertaken to mitigate that, to ensure we deliver for the schools that we need to within Torfaen Local Authority.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question is question 3 from Councillor Cowles.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to paragraph 4.4, and that paragraph mentions the groups that support the development of collaborative school improvement work as recommended by the middle tier review. How confident are you with these arrangements, and are there any gaps that you can identify?
We feel that over a number of years, these are not new arrangements, they have evolved over at least 5 to 7 years, I would say, where we've built up strong, confident relationships with our head teachers. There are always tweaks to some of the reporting mechanisms and the data and the expectations we have of head teachers, but we know the relationships are strong. We've tweaked this year to allow head teachers from within local authorities to support as SIPs as well. Traditionally, it was they would only support outside. That's been seen as positive. The work from the Professor, I'm upgrading him slightly, I think he's Dr. Steve Mumby review has highlighted, and head teachers have their chance to have their views on the arrangements and how they work for them. As we've discussed in the past, it is not just about the funding for that, it's about the professional development opportunities within schools that allows, when you can backfill with staff, allow them to be working with others, and we believe that SIPs and partner schools get as much out of the relationship as those receiving the support, and I think that's the key.
I think we've, as part of this whole report, we've also talked about the Welsh Government's new school improvement guidance. That was probably fairly recently. What we're doing there in terms of that work, but also the introduction of the head teacher strategy group and all of those other groups aligns quite nicely with that as well. So it's making sure that it's a collaboration, a full partnership between schools, LACIS and the local authority, as opposed to the local authority just doing something to schools or LACIS doing something to schools. I mean, I don't think in the 3 years I've been here that I've ever seen anything like that. It's always been a partnership, but it just reaffirms that we're operating in the way that the Welsh Government would expect us to operate.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Question 4, Victoria Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. This is in relation to 4.5 in the report, and one of the themes from our school visit was the lack of consistency in the application of the school improvement partners within the framework of what good looks like. Also, from reading the recent letter to the Senedd Children, Young People and Education Committee from to the Cabinet Secretary for Education, it is clear that there is a lack of definition of what good looks like across Wales. With this in mind, how can we measure and ensure a consistent approach from our SIPs and LACIS in supporting our schools?
Thank you. We have quite rigorous and robust systems for monitoring our school improvement partners. They all have to undertake termly professional learning, where we look at the work programme in quite a lot of detail. We talk about the expectations of the role, we talk about the time frame of the role. I do an awful lot of QA for the Torvine SIPs in particular, so on a termly basis I will have catch-up conversations with them. I will look at their work programme, I will look at the quality of the paperwork that they produce. I will do joint visits with anyone that I feel isn't perhaps quite doing what they need to do. We will do joint quality assessment of their work together. We've got lots of helpful documents that we provide for our school improvement partners as well, so we're constantly getting them to look at and refer to our teaching and learning guidance, our self-evaluation guidance. They have their own PL processes as well, so there is bespoke professional learning for school improvement partners around the role and what we expect from them. And where necessary, we actually do move school improvement partners on. So I'm very confident at the moment with the group of school improvement partners that we have. We do vet, we do support, we do monitor. We have reduced the number of school improvement partners that we have in Torvine. We started off with about 26, we now have 16. I'm one of those school improvement partners as well as leading them. So I'm very confident that the ones that we have are the right ones for the schools. And I think, you know, if we look at ESTIN outcomes, our pre-inspection commentaries and our prejudgments of where we think those schools will be are very, very accurate.
If I can add very briefly, to add on the broader partner school model with all the curriculum schools, the area of learning schools that we have. We reviewed all of those in the summer last year. We actually invited bids from all schools. We took the whole of the summer to actually evaluate and actually visit many of the partner schools. So we visited to see the practice, evaluate the practice to ensure that it was quality assured before delivery. We committed to 2 years for those schools in that because we recognise that schools need to evolve in that, but we will always keep evolving that model so that we do not just stick with the school because they have been a partner school for a time. We act on concerns if there are any concerns about the provision, and we have rejigged to remove elements of the provision that certain schools do. We also know that it can depend on capacity within school as well. If you've got an expert in a secondary school on history and they're delivering as a partner school and they move on, then that school will not necessarily have the capacity in that area, and it may be a different school that we find. So it's an evolving model all the time based on quality assurance and the feedback we have from other schools as well.
Andrew?
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. I think this is a really important point, and Debbie Hartveld and I were both part of a group that briefed the members of the Senedd before the hearing with the Cabinet Secretary. And Debbie and I both spoke about the variance across Wales. Part of the limitations is, for example, we don't have externally verified data until the end of Key Stage 4 with external exams. There's no standardised assessment across Wales to look at the progress of learners. So it is a real challenge, and there is variance across Wales because of this. Debbie and I also met with the Director of Education from Welsh Government last week. We had a further conversation about this, and we shared the teaching and learning strategy and the toolkit that has been developed by LACIS, saying that at least in the region we're trying to introduce some standardisation. And Welsh Government are really interested to see what we've done. So they're actually meeting with LACIS in the next few weeks to discuss it. They're also coming to our head teacher strategy group and our school improvement strategy group to see how we're co-developing this together. To some extent, I'm just thinking back to the discussion we've had about looked after children outcomes. Again, we're in a really difficult position because there's no standardised expectation around that. So it is a work in progress. We are trying to introduce some standardisation across the region, but there is variance across Wales.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. Jane?
Thank you. You mentioned there that if schools or heads aren't satisfied with the service they're getting from this, that they can then comment or complain about it. Are you confident they're all aware of who they need to speak to if that's the case?
Yes, they are very confident. I have a really good working relationship with the head teachers. I attend all of the head teachers' meetings. I'm also part of the SIG group that meet with with that group. I get lots and lots of emails from head teachers all times of the day. You know, if they've got a concern that is particularly around school improvement, I would say they're very comfortable and confident to contact myself. And hopefully, you know, between myself, Andrew, Andy, and LACIS, we can usually support what they need.
Andy?
Yeah, just so that's not a lone voice, I mean, we'd echo that from a local authority point of view. We're happy with the service, but the dialogue and flow of information, if concerns arise, that's shared, and we do take action. We have taken action, more historically than recently, but we have taken action if we've needed to. So I'm happy that that professional relationship and the boundaries exist. We all want, we've all got children at the heart of this, and if it's not working for children fundamentally, then action has to be taken, and we do.
Briefly to add on this, it is very often about the fit of people, circumstances, the context of schools as well. And we're not implying in any of this a sort of fault on one party or the other. It is very often just sort of the nuances of getting the right people to work with people. And that takes time, doesn't it, too? You know, but we will listen to concerns on that is the key.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keith, question 5.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm afraid I haven't put a question forward.
You've been allocated a question because you were at the visit, and you've got. Shall I read it out for you, Councillor Keith?
Please, if you could, please. I've got difficulties at the moment. I can see you, but you can't see me. Sorry, I can't see my windscreen. I don't know what's going on here at the moment, but I'm in all sorts of trouble with my computer.
Okay.
Right?
So the question we allocated to Councillor Keith, because he did attend both visits to the school, is relating to 4.6. And the question is, members have been made aware that for some time schools' consistency and stability can be a problem regarding SIPs, with job opportunities taking them elsewhere. Would you like to comment on retention levels and consistency issues encountered? You mentioned something about consistency, but retention levels.
Yeah, obviously, you know, we would very much like to keep our head teachers in Torfaen, but, you know, they do move on, and actually some of our school improvement partners get jobs in in different authorities, which takes them away. We'd probably also say that, you know, a head teacher, experienced though they are, if they're starting in a new school, their priority is going to be to that school. It really isn't going to be about the school improvement role. They need to make sure that they've got capacity and that they get, you know, to learn their new school systems and things like that. We haven't had very much variation in the last 3 years. We have had some SIPs who have asked to step down for personal reasons. That's absolutely understandable. We've had a very few occasions where perhaps the new SIP and the head teacher haven't quite gelled, that relationship hasn't quite been right. But again, head teachers will usually have a conversation with myself or the local authority to say, we're not quite comfortable, it isn't quite working, and we will find a way around that, you know, and we will either work with them, make sure that that relationship is the right one, or we'll change it. But in terms of school improvement partners, the only changes really we've made in the last couple of years is where we've had Caerphilly school improvement partners that obviously now have moved to their own local authority, and we've had to replace those. But where we've replaced them, it has been SIPs that have previously worked in Torvine schools.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, colleagues have mentioned the review that Steve Mumby did just recently. One of the key recommendations out of that review was to consider succession planning and how that looks. And I think that's something at all levels, so that's school improvement partner, that's partner schools, but that's equally for us as officers to think about head teachers, deputy head teachers, so how we're developing our future leaders and what the vision is for 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So we've always got to have that ticking over in our minds as well. So there'll be, as a recommendation, that's going to be considered, and you know, obviously there's going to be something that comes out of that in terms of next steps.
Councillor Keats, just a forewarning, you've got question 17, if you can...
I can see it now.
Fine.
I've got my other computer working now, finally.
Okay, thanks.
So,
it takes us to question 6, which is Victoria Holder.
Thank you, Chair. This is in reference to 4.6, the school-to-school support. An important matter that came up when we visited our schools in this last week was the matter of timely payment from LACIS and also the administrative burden on our schools having to complete the databases and populate the information of the support they provide. Could you please confirm how this is being addressed?
We have had some feedback on changes to the financial systems that we do. I think there have been some misunderstandings where we perhaps didn't communicate clearly. It's about, ultimately, the changes to ensure that the schools actually do deliver on the work that's undertaken, and there is a paperwork trail on the back of that. There were some misunderstandings that schools didn't feel that they'd have those payments guaranteed for the year. They do, if they deliver the work. What we've done, or what Debbie Harveld has done, is set up a small working group with head teachers on board where we are going to investigate this further and communicate to all schools to reassure, ultimately, that the fundamental system has not changed at all. It was just a tightening up of some of the things because, as you know, we have to report to the local authority. The local authority has to account for the grant funding. So we do need that level of bureaucracy, but as ever, we will endeavour to keep it to the minimum that's required. So a reasonable point from some of our heads.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to the follow-up.
Chair, could I make a comment? I think you already said it. I might be taking a little bit of poetic license here, but I think it should be said, probably loosely related to this item, how complementary the schools that I am involved with anyway, of the service level agreement that we get from Torvine. I think we had that from the school that we visited the other day, and I know we get that from the schools I'm members of. Well, the service we get from both personnel, from finance and all, is exceptional. So I think that should be noted.
I agree. We take the compliments everywhere we go of how it's now working. So yeah, thanks very much, and it's good to record. So, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good example of where we've had feedback from heads about something that's not working well, and we've reacted to it quickly. So one of the head teachers you visited raised this concern with me about 2 weeks ago. I had that conversation with Debbie Hartfeld the same day, and within a few days, Geraint, the director of ES, was out speaking with that individual head teacher, and like Ed said, a working group's been convened to address it. So I think it shows, again, like we're listening, we're taking timely responses.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can see that from our visits. You know, they might tell us the rough bits, but they also tell us the good bits as well. So, well done. Okay, the next question is Councillor Watkins on question 7, please.
Thank you, Chair. Are you confident that LASSIS is providing sufficient challenge as well as support, and are there any concerns around capacity or expertise?
I think that's probably a question that the local authority's got to answer as we commission LASSIS. I'm sure Andrew's going to want to have a comment here as well. In fact, Andrew's hand is up, so maybe Andrew should go first.
Yes, just a challenge, first of all. I know the School Improvement Service is trying to recruit an additional Principal School Improvement Partner, and that's gone out to advert twice. It's something we've talked about at regional directors this week and not being able to recruit. And so there is a bit of a concern about succession planning within the service. But what we've discussed as regional directors with Debbie Hartfeld is, well, what other models could we operate about perhaps a part-time secondment for a head teacher out into these roles, a bit of time to test. But I think that succession planning is a potential concern, and that's not just within our region. Across Wales, recruiting effective staff into the school improvement services is really challenging. I think a lot of people would like to stay in schools now, and to come out and have a change of terms and condition, potentially a change of payment, is a real challenge.
Thank you. That takes us to Councillor Watkins.
No,
sorry. Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. My question refers to 4.11 of the report. Members noted that the Purple Referral Unit was only briefly mentioned in the report. Are you confident that we have sufficient school improvement support in this particular area?
I think that's a good question. I'm sure Karen's going to want to jump in on this as well. Yes, we are. The PRU gets exactly the same level of support available to it. You have to note that the PRU is slightly different to schools because of the nature of what it's trying to achieve and deliver. That's why LASSIS have commissioned the head of the PRU in Bridgend, who's now worked with our PRU for the last 2.5, 3 years. So that support's very bespoke, and it reflects the need of the PRU. So there's expert sort of sharing of information and knowledge. But all of the PL that is available to all schools is also available to the PRU. I know Karen's done a number of bespoke sessions herself within the PRU, looking at school improvement planning, self-evaluation. Members of the PRU have been out to access professional learning from other schools, so Jubilee Park in particular, I think, where there's some good activity around, again, self-evaluation and school improvement planning. There's been a lot of access there. One of the other strengths of the PRU, and in terms of PL, is the offer of the other PRUs within the region, as it were. So Newport's PRU, Monmouth's PRU, they work closely together to share practice as well, just again because the nuance and nature of a PRU is different primarily to a mainstream school. Karen, I don't know if there's more that you wanted to add to that.
Probably we're saying that the current head teacher at the PRU came from another PRU in the partnership, so has established good links there. But also, we spent a long time looking for the right match for our PRU, which is why we've gone out of the partnership. You know, it's important that whoever they're working with, they're getting what they need. So they have a school-to-school model there, which means that they don't just get the school improvement partner, they also get targeted support from Bridgend PRU as well. So that's for all the staff, not just the leaders. And they have done an awful lot of professional learning, and with support from local authority, from their SIP, from myself, they've done an awful lot of recruitment. There's an awful lot of new teachers in there who are also accessing the universal professional learning offer. They engage very, very well with us as a local authority school improvement service. They engage very, very well with their school improvement partner. And they're very open to visits as well. So if ever they're doing self-evaluation, they want that external viewpoint. They're always asking, will you come, will you work alongside us, will you help and will you support? So, yeah, we're confident, I think, that they're getting what they need, and, we can see through the progress that they're making that they are on the right tracks.
Okay. Andy?
Just a final bit on that. So the PRU, unlike schools, has a management committee, which is different to a school's governing body, but in many ways discharges the same function. So it's there to challenge and support the strategic leadership. So the direction that the head's taking the PRU in. The management committee as well has been through a journey of, I suppose, improvement. So there's been training and support for the management committee that's been provided, but also now the management committee is very active in terms of visiting the PRU. Councillor Seaborn, I'm sure you get the emails inviting you to come and take part in lesson observations, learning walks, and that's done in conjunction with LACIS as well. So there's the governor, the management committee element that works alongside as well. So yeah, there's a lot of activity that they're engaged with, and they're very open-minded and receptive to support.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you.
Just going to add in. They're part of our team around the school approach as well, and because of their current category at the moment, we make sure that that's every half term. So we're constantly sort of supporting but challenging and looking at their progress very regularly.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you very much. So you are confident there aren't any gaps. So that is really pleasing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Question 9, Councillor Thomas.
My question relates to 4.12. It's just really about the attendance at the training sessions. What feedback has been received about this, and has alternative times or formats been explored? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll pick this one up to start with, and Ed might want to join in. So, just in terms of big picture, so in terms of the overall support that we offer to governors, so there's the bespoke online programs that are offered, that I'm sure you're aware of. There's on-demand training, so we've got a website where we've developed a series of modules for on-demand training linked to attendance, safeguarding, plus everything that LACIS offers across the partnership. We've done cluster governor training, which I think you'll all be very familiar with because we've been with you for those cluster governor sessions. So this was an addition to an addition, I suppose. We wrote out to all governors and members back in the spring term, asking them what professional learning that they would like to receive in terms of bespoke. Jess, one of our colleagues who runs Evaluation and Improvement Officer, looked through the themes that were coming out of that, and then based on those themes, we identified that I think there were 5 particular areas where governors were asking for some specific training. Off the top of my head, I can't remember them all, but I know that we've done a session on attendance and a session on comms. So the LA comms team, we're going to run a session for governors. Yeah, attendance at both of those has been full. We've had one person turn up across both sessions. We know that from feedback that we've had previously, the reason that we introduced the on-demand section of governor training was when we say, look, we're going to do something on this day and this time, that doesn't work for everybody's agenda and calendar. So that's why we introduced the on-demand element. I suspect it's not about the quality of the training or the topics. The topics were chosen by governors and members. I just suspect it's about availability. And, we can look to tweak and change sessions, but actually, probably the learning that we've had from the last 18 months has been the cluster governor training model is by far and away the most effective for many reasons. One of those reasons is it brings governors across the cluster together to get that conversation and relationship developing. And we've seen some really nice examples of how clusters have taken that on themselves and just continue to run cluster governor sessions. But one of the things that we're going to probably do in the summer term is write out to chairs of governors and heads again and offer to facilitate a session for the agenda of which chairs and teachers can set, and we'll try and run that for the next academic year again. They've been really good. We're pleased with those. But so, direct feedback about why attendance for this session has been low, not really sure. Probably assume it's down to.
I think the cluster training was very good, and as you said, bringing governors together was a bonus, really, wasn't it? So I think, look forward to that.
just to add briefly to Andy's point, agree that the cluster sort of model that we've had in Torvine with getting around everyone, chairs were very supportive of it, and heads, which was great. But that was just a starter from our perspective in terms of we can build on that. In terms of the on-demand model, we've built on that because we know there is no perfect time for everyone. We used to, I was reflecting last night at a school where we'd have, sessions all over the region, which were difficult for governors to travel to. I also say that no one particularly wants to come to my complaints training for the love of hearing all about complaints. They tend to want to come to complaints training when they have a complaint come in. Therefore, the on-demand model, 25-minute recording from me with a PowerPoint, is much more efficient. Also, if you're on a complaints committee, you will get the video sent to you before you attend that committee, which is when you need to hear it, really. So we're trying to evolve that model, but for face-to-face, our programme that was put out in October, you will notice there are far fewer set time sessions than ever, but there's the option for clusters, governing bodies to ask for a mix and match of what's on offer delivered at a time to suit you, which is our priority.
I think that's really good. I attended 2 of your cluster meetings. One is approved for the Westmont cluster and one in my own area. So, yeah, I think they worked well. We had good attendance, and I think that's the way, I think that's the way to go, really. It's really good. Yes, sorry, Andy.
I totally agree, and it just falls in line with, we're asking schools to work in terms of clusters more and more. You've received a thematic report on that already. That follows Welsh Government guidance. We know that learner pathways, learner journeys from entry, and especially with our schools with flying start settings at 3 years old all the way through to 16. That's a cluster approach. The community has to take responsibility for the provision that the child gets, and governors as that strategic arm. Just bringing them together to do that role really important as well. But keep promoting it.
Yeah. Next question is question 10, and that's John Cunningham, please.
Thank you, that's right. Question 10 refers to 4.12 in relation to school governors. When I've asked this question and I've answered, Chairman, can I supplement it after? In terms of supporting and holding leaders to account for school improvement, does this include governors? And if so, how is this carried out?
Maybe I'll start on the supporting bit. Ed might also want to be involved in this as well. So in terms of the support, supporting governors, yes, there's the training modules and those various bits and pieces, and they're useful, and as Des already alluded to, generally when the need is there, the request comes in for support, and Ed and the team will step in quite happily, and we run bespoke sessions on that front. I suppose one of the other elements of support, but I think also challenge here, is around the use of, we hold termly team around the school meetings with all of our secondary schools and the PRU, with which the Chair of Governors is always invited to attend. And then we also hold an annual school improvement conversation, SDP meeting, with all of our primary schools, again, where the Chair of Governors is invited. And naturally, through those conversations, when we're talking about the school improvement plan, for example, we'll be asking the Governor, the Chair of Governors in those meetings, well, have you had sight of the school improvement plan? Have you signed it off as a governing body? What's your role? Who are the link governors assigned to different elements within the school improvement plan? That way, we're asking the Chair of Governors around, okay, so we can support you with that as well, all governors, we can support you with that as well, but what's your role? What impact are you having, and how are you supporting the school? We'll just use the example of a management committee conducting learning walks in the school. That's because Sarah, the head of the PRUs, identified that she would like certain members of the management committee to come in, and they can do that, and then got a bit of a dual role here, but we can then hold ourselves to account around that as well.
Just to add, Chair, that accountability can come through support as well. And an example, without naming the school, Andrew and team identified a school that perhaps wasn't scrutinising the finance of the school as well as they could be. They didn't have the right committee structures in place to be able to do that. So I spent, a couple of terms working with them, attending their meetings, as did other colleagues, to be able to sort of model perhaps what they should be doing in terms of scrutiny, the questions that they should be asking, the data and information that should have been presented to them as well. So accountability and scrutiny and the challenge and support are not necessarily mutually exclusive, and they go hand in hand as well.
You have a supplementary, John?
I'm sorry, this is the first sight I've seen this report when I walked in, so I could have added it onto the question had I had the report. But in relation to school governors and the vacancies, and there's 67 vacancies now throughout the borough, which is better than it was, but it's still bad. And I was looking at the minor authorities where they have 23 vacancies. Now, that's always been a problem since I joined the Cumbrian Community Council in 1978. And I don't know of any minor authorities that have got representatives on any school government. But I don't know. I don't know any in the Cumbrian area. But you've got a couple there, have you? Yeah. But I mean, do you think it's probably that being a school governor now is not a mean feat, really? You've got a lot of responsibility to be. Do you think it frightens them off a little bit as a result of being a school governor? And maybe they pull back on it. And I see you've got 9 local authority appointed governors. That's difficult to understand.
Shall I bring Councillor Clark in first and then Andrew after?
Thank you. I was going to speak to John's first part. I know people have dealt with the effectiveness of governors once appointed. I think one of the important things that we've done when I became executive member is to take away what I always called the beauty pageant. It wasn't whose face fitted or what political party they were or this, that and the other. People now apply to be local authority governors. They have to fill in an application and they have to state quite clearly their, not character, but their transferable skills that will make them a good governor. So before we even get to the process of are they effective, we've reviewed that, myself, Andy, Andrew and Lassis as governor's support before governors are appointed. So I think that in itself is an improvement. It doesn't mean that once in post that the support that has been outlined to you is not necessary. It's fundamental. So, you know, I think it's important to have that upfront uploaded element rather than, and again I use the term, I wish I could find a better one, but a beauty pageant. In reflection of Mr Cunningham's, seems strange to call you that, John, Mr Cunningham's second point, yes, community councils are an issue within appointing governors. We have no control over that other than gentle persuasion that they should appoint them, and what an opportunity. I think you've been told in the chamber that some communities councils do appoint. I know Chris Caiof and Llanrafon do, because obviously I've got a vested interest in that area. In terms of the LA appointed governors, 9 isn't where I'd want to be. I'd like to be a lot lower. I myself actually came out of a retirement, so to speak, and I'm now a governing member of St David's Roman Catholic School. Quite useful for me as well, because you actually see at the chalk face what's physically going on in the schools, as well as my school visits. But that number has certainly come down, certainly from when Eston inspected us, and we are actively seeking new appointments, and we probably get 3 or 4 each meeting that we have. So I'm hopeful that our figure will come down on that. But it's the right and appropriate people. I could turn around now and look at 9 elected members if I wanted to and say, well, you're not in a governing body, we'll put you on this governing body. They might have no interest in that and they might not attend. So what are we achieving then? I'd rather have 9 people who are committed to the school and have skills that are useful for the school. And I'll stop there because I've probably said far too much.
I'll remember myself when I invite you in again. Can I just bring Andrew in, please? Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'll sort of answer this in 4 parts, considering the first question is supplementary. I think, first of all, I just want to say I have huge respect for governors who give their time voluntarily, and it's an incredibly responsible position. So I do take my hat off just for that voluntary aspect of the role. In terms of holding governing bodies to account, I've got an example of a school that recently had a governor whose conduct was inappropriate from the governing body's own view, and they've dealt with that internally. They've managed that process. And again, I really applaud that, because that's quite a challenging thing to do. Where a governing body isn't functioning properly, the LA can issue either a pre-warning or a warning notice to the school, and that notice goes to the governing body. It doesn't go to a head teacher, it's the governing body. So within Torvine, we have made use of a pre-warning notice in the last few years, which the governing body responded really positively to. They actually found it very helpful to have a clear steer on their areas of development, and that then didn't progress to a full warning notice. If a full warning notice is issued, then the local authority can use statutory powers against the school. So that could be making governing bodies work with an external agency, with another governing body, for example. It could be appointing additional governors to the body. It could be de-delegating the school budget, or in the case that actually did happen with Cumbrae High, the removal of the governing body and the statement of an interim executive board. My personal feeling is that if it's got to that point, then that's a real breakdown in relationships and a shared understanding. So that's absolutely not where I want us to be. But that is how it sits within current Welsh Government guidance. Welsh Government are reviewing that guidance at the moment, and we're waiting for the latest draft to come out. The last part for me is just that the Welsh Government are reviewing the roles and the structures of governors. So this is an active piece of work that they've recently begun, because again, it's a real challenge in recruiting governors, in recruiting the right ones in the right place. So Welsh Government are going right back to basics and thinking, what could governance structures in schools look like? Again, this is very early days, and there'll be a wider consultation for us all to be part of. But I think it's important to flag that up at this point.
Thank you, Andrew. I think they might want to look at the appeal process that we'll remove from the previous policy. So, yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, just to say, in relation to Councillor Clark's comment about the reports he's had about the effectiveness of LEA or LA governors, all I hope, Richard Clark, is I was one of them. Did he hear that? You want me to say that again?
We ran a session last summer in a very hot coity room upstairs to just with the local authority appointed LA governors, just to talk with them about what their role is, how it's the same as being a school governor, but also how it's different, how there are some nuances around that, and I think that's really important, and we'll certainly be revisiting that, maybe not this year, but maybe in another year's time, just to reaffirm those messages about what's the same, but also what's different.
Thank you for that. That takes us to question 11, which is Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. My next question is in relation to paragraphs 4.15. Would you be able to supply an update on how working with Dusky is progressing, or is it too early?
I'll start with that, Councillor Jones. It is too early. Dusky doesn't even have a website or an action plan at the moment. In March, they're intending to publish their strategic plan, which will be followed by operational plans. There are the projects that have been commissioned, and there's some details in the report to support literacy, numeracy, and RSE within schools. But it's very early days. So again, I met with the Chief Executive of Dusky last week. She's newly appointed. She's coming to a head teacher meeting in Torvine in the summer just to meet everybody, to get feedback, but they still haven't recruited all of their workforce, let alone set out their plans at this point.
Okay, Janet.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, that takes us to question 12, which is relating to 4.19 of the report. And it's my question. With regards to the curriculum for Wales, would you be able to provide a progress update on whether this is fully embedded across Torfaen and how schools link with the LA and LACES? Who's doing this one?
Do you mean in relation to the whole curriculum for Wales? Maybe start with Karen on that one in terms of the whole curriculum for Wales. I know that 4.19 talks to a grants element.
I'm not completely sure about the grant. I mean, in terms of curriculum for Wales within Torfaen schools, then certainly in the primary schools, the new curriculum, I'm calling it new, it's not new anymore, but their curriculum visions are very, very, very well established. You know, we have really strong practice in most of our primary schools around the curriculum offer and what they're providing and the breadth and the depth of learning experiences. And I would probably say it's developing well in around about half of our secondary schools, particularly at Key Stage 3. Key Stage 4 is slightly different because obviously we're still in the exam mode there, but certainly trying to build on those more authentic learning experiences in Key Stage 3 is working well in probably half the secondary schools, and the others are beginning to think about what that's going to look like, but also mindful of how it's going to impact.
I'd just add to that. So yeah, we're confident that all schools in Torfaen fulfil the mandatory elements of Curriculum for Wales. There aren't many mandatory elements compared to Curriculum 2008 and previous national curriculums, but we're confident that all schools in primary, secondary, and also the mandatory elements of the PRU as well, they're covered. We're really happy with that. In terms of what curriculum is, what Curriculum for Wales is, there was a refining of what it meant, and there was a much sharper focus on knowledge, skills and experiences. And I think the bit that Karen's alluded to there about the authenticity element, you know, bringing the curriculum to life, our schools have done that and done that really well, and they've really approached the authentic learning of you know, bringing those rich experiences into school. That's been done well. And we know that because Eston are telling us that in their inspection reports. We can see that again we haven't had an inspection report in the last 3 or 4 years where it's talked about underdeveloped knowledge, skills or experiences. We know that within reports there are things that are recommendations for schools around the specifics around maybe further developing a skills framework or literacy, but actually that breadth is being delivered well. And as, just to reiterate again, we know against the mandatory elements of Curriculum for Wales, all of our schools are fulfilling that.
So, question 14 is Councillor Thomas. My apologies, I'm doubled here. My question 13, 4.22. In pre-agenda, members raise concerns that they do not receive a lot of information about the Torfaen Learning Zone. Is this an area that could be strengthened, and particularly around the reporting and monitoring of outcomes and improvements?
Sorry, are you waiting for me, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So yeah, this is an active piece of work with regional directors, and that we want to standardise the reporting that we get from Coleg Gwent to all 5 local authorities. So we're actually meeting them at the beginning of March to discuss this. So I agree, I think there's room for development here in terms of how we get reporting and we share it on learner outcomes. We do have a post-16 partnership meeting that takes place termly, which Jason talks about, and what Jason chairs, and he may wish to talk about. And again, I think there's real areas of development here that about how we work with Coleg Gwent. So I guess in short, it's an agreement, it's an area for development, and it's potentially a scrutiny topic for the future.
Just before Jason comes in on the partnership bit, sitting underneath the partnership board, which is made up of head teachers and officers from the local authority and the college, we've also got a curriculum group. So that's all of the deputy heads from the primary school, from the secondary schools, plus a primary school representative who meet with colleague Gwent and myself, Claire Williams, head of ALN and Inclusion, and Careers Wales. But that's more focused around learner destinations rather than sort of outcomes, as it were. So that's a focus around learner destinations and pathways for learners, but also around transition from secondary school into college, and about the outreach programme that college have got, where they engage and visit schools and bring schools up to the college as well. So that active group that meets again half-termly to look at all of those elements.
In terms of the post-16 partnership, I think what is safe to say is it's a developing partnership. What we've been really effective in doing in the last 12 to 18 months so is bringing the schools and Coleg Gwent together to really start to map out some of the pathways and destinations for post-16 learners to determine where, the schools obviously have a keen interest in where their learners are going and the pathways of their learners post-18. It's great that the schools don't just shut the door at 16 and want that ongoing interest and understanding them. So that's the development process. I think we've got a fairly robust process within the partnership where schools are able to challenge Coleg Gwent and are able to challenge some of those processes or pathways rather. And we're keen to be doing, obviously we do that every year then when we get some of the outcomes from in terms of the academic results. One of the things that we have mooted within the post-16 partnership is a member seminar for Coleg Gwent, so that members will be aware, there's a significant shift, I guess, in terms of investment and approach when we move from sixth forms into Coleg Gwent. So I think members, even outside of the scrutiny panel, will have a keen interest in that. So we'll be setting up a members seminar in the coming months.
Just a token of our discussion at pre-agenda, we're losing touch with post-16 at the moment, and we still have that responsibility. Thank you. Question 4, Councillor Thomas. At 14.
Chair, my question relates to 4.24. 12.4% of Torfaen pupils have a category of additional learning needs, which is slightly higher. This is slightly above the Welsh average of 9.3. Are ALN needs being met, or is there any additional support required from the LA or LACES? Sorry. Are ALN needs being met, or is there any additional support required from the LA and or LACES?
Let's start with that. Yes, we're always aiming to make sure that every learner, again, it goes back to what we were talking to the member of the public about, the particular IDP, what's in there, and making sure that needs are met and a regular review of that. There are challenges with that, so sometimes for some of those learners, their starting point in education, because of a particular need, might be lower. That's not to say that their progress or journey isn't the same, but they've got more distance to cover. We talked about this previously, about attainment and achievement. So I do think that their needs are being met, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get to the same level of attainment, but they do attain potentially as well. Many of our schools have got learning resource spaces, and they'll get targeted and special support within those, and we've got a number of learners in the PRU for various reasons. And in fact, one of the success stories of the PRU for this year, compared to the previous year, we're anticipating that this year more children than ever on record are going to be getting GCSEs and A-level GCSEs and GCSE equivalent qualifications. We're really pleased about that. That links back to the support that has been received and the changes to provision and curriculum. So we're seeing learners in the PRU, for example, who are going to be getting a much bigger range of qualifications than ever before. So, yes, but it does come with challenges as well. I don't know, Karen, if there's more that you wanted to answer or add.
Just briefly, recognition as well that ALN proportion is linked to socio-economic context as well, and if you look at the figures for both, they're very much interlinked. To build on what Andy said about achievement of these learners, I think we still have an examination system in a way that is not necessarily catering for all, but there are changes afoot on large parts of that examination system. And you will see also the measures that we talk about in Appendix 2 in the detail. Those are legacy, they're interim measures from 2019. Those measures still, whilst they attempted to, do not necessarily capture the achievement of every learner. It is down to individuals here where you are looking at the progress that can be made. Those measures are under review at the moment by Welsh Government, and hopefully this term, even into the next term, new announcements will emerge on the measures that should take into account the achievement of all.
Those new measures, if you look in 4.25, we've added a link there to the consultation, basically, the Welsh Government are undertaking around that. That's likely to bring actually more, we think that's going to bring more information in, but you'll be able to apply it in a more contextual way that will help you to understand, we talked about different groups of learners, but the FSM in particular, rather than wholesale holistic measures.
Thank you. The report also refers to free school meals. Could I ask a question on that about the consistency, if anything, throughout Pan Gwent on the subsidy given for free school meal? I've heard that some schools get a bigger subsidy than other schools, maybe not necessarily in Torfaen, but throughout the Pan Gwent area.
By subsidy, do you mean grant funding based on free? Right, okay. So the formulas are consistent in terms of that. The grant funding is controlled by the local authorities now rather than us, but the formula that are used are very often defined by the terms and conditions of the grant, so they are consistent. There is always the complexity of defining how many of your learners are eligible for free school meals, and that's probably a debate that's been going on for 20 years in terms of how consistent we can be in that, because it does depend on claim, and I've had that debate many times. So it's not necessarily a problem with any of the formula used, and there are efforts made, I know, within Torfaen to definitely increase the consistency and increase the uptake, because as well, as you say, as well as depending on the measures, which is the subject of this report, it does impact on grant funding as well.
Yeah, thank you. We had a meeting yesterday with all the head teachers in Torfaen, the term and a half meeting, and we had colleagues of the Director of Education from Welsh Government attended that meeting, and one of the big topics of conversation was the consistency and fairness of pupil development grant funding, the criteria. We're aware that Welsh Government are looking at that again to find out if there's a better way of doing it or a different way of doing it. In primary schools at the minute, every child in Wales is entitled to a free school meal. In secondary schools, they're not. That's Welsh Government policy. That came through a manifesto pledge. You know, that's great, but it also then brings with it, are we missing children who are genuinely in deprived areas in primary schools because they might not be claiming it because they just are universally getting free school meals, and there are other grants through Welsh Government that are available that we want to make sure that everybody gets access to. So yeah, I think Welsh Government are aware that there are some issues there, and they're looking into what might be done next.
So really what you're saying then, it relates to budgetary constraints within this authority of how much the grant funding is then for free school meals? Because I know that other authorities give a bigger subsidy or a bigger grant for free school meals.
Ours is equal and fair compared to anywhere else in Wales, because the criteria that we're using was based on the Welsh Government criteria. Obviously, we'd like more money from Welsh Government, but no, in terms of that PDG funding, ours is based on the same criteria that children in Newport, children in Monmouth, the same criteria is applied.
I didn't want to mention the authority.
Andrew, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I think we might be talking at cross purposes here in terms of it's coming up. I'm not sure if you're talking about actually the amount of funding schools receive to provide a meal for learners. Is that what you,
yes,
is that what
that's
you
what
mean?
I mean. Yes.
Yes, yeah. That's a slightly separate issue. So in terms of the grant funding that comes to schools, that is standard across Wales. There may be variance across Gwent in the amount that individual schools receive from their local authority for lunches. I don't have that data with me, but that's something we can provide to you after the meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. takes us to question 15, which is Councillor Cowles.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report in Appendix 2 confirm that there is a gap in high-level achievement and also lower relative performance of the upper third of pupils on CAP 9 in 4 of our secondary schools. Are you confident that all the appropriate focus is being applied to all thirds within schools, particularly in terms of more able and talented pupils, and is best practice being shared effectively?
Thank you, Councillor. You picked up the chart on 1.21, which is one of the most interesting charts in the whole pack for me. It does identify and surface some questions to ask, I would say, of schools. The first thing is context. And a little bit earlier in the report, I know I did a briefing last year with PowerPoint, which I haven't repeated this year, but it's worth remembering what 54 points mean, because 54 points means in this either a whole grade or a whole grade below for every learner per subject, because 6 across 9 subjects, 54. So what that means is the ones that are below, Aberystwyth lowest, is approximately 1/3 of a grade per learner below. The others are all actually compared on that upper third very close to the line. What you have to do is discuss with the individual schools, the entry policies, the cohort, the background to that cohort, to understand. It's how far away you are from the line, not just being below, if that makes sense. There is more actual variance on the lower third as well, isn't there, if you look at that chart? And we noticed that pattern across Wales as well. And you may have heard me say last year that the impact that schools make is actually greatest on the lowest third of learners. And when you get it right for the lowest thirds of learners, you tend to get it right for middle and upper third as well, although not universally true on that chart, but generally across Wales. In terms of the work that's been going on, the work takes place from the first week of September, not now when you're getting the data. And yes, there is a broad sharing of practice. There's a broad sharing of the systems that schools use to track pupils and monitor performance and challenge pupils ultimately and support them as well within our schools. And we do our utmost to be sharing those systems and the practice within subject, because that's what has the greatest impact.
Ed's alluded to the work started in September. It did, but it started in September before that, and the September before that as well. As we've already mentioned, we visit all of our secondary schools on a at least termly basis, 1 or 2 where we visit a little bit more frequently. And a topic of conversation, a standard item in the agenda, is looking at either, depending on the time of year we're in, targets for the coming year. So what are you targeting? What's your profile looking like? Or as it would be, as we're coming up now into March, we're going to be visiting schools after half term. What's your profile looking like in terms of your data drop? What are your predictions against your targets? How do you think things are shaping up? So 2 years ago, we picked up the A-star to A performance across Torvine needed work. One of the things that we've done around that is, Andrew's already mentioned the teaching and learning guidance that LASIS has developed. We've pulled together a local authority version of that, which is heavily talks to meeting the needs of all learners. We've tried to link it to the sort of ALN inclusive practice approach, so that we're ideally meeting the needs of all learners in a way that then should drive up higher expectation in terms of those outcomes. We're going to keep monitoring it and keep pushing it, but it remains a topic of conversation with all head teachers around where we're going next and how we're performing. But I think the key bit is, and this again links to Eston recommendations, self-evaluation processes in schools. We know that that's one of the most significant recommendations across Wales. We've worked tirelessly with schools to try and improve those evaluation processes. We want to be able for a school to say confidently to us, this is what we're targeting, and then at the end of the year, this is what the outcome is. That's the correlation that we want to see, linked with high expectations. So we don't just want to settle for a C grade, we want a B or an A, and we're pushing for that higher expectation. And that's really important. It links to the Marmot principles within the council. But fundamentally, it's how well does the school know itself, how well does it know its pupils, how does it perform at the end of the year, and that correlation there is really, really important.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of wider context about CAP 9s and thirds. So the CAP 9 qualification is made up, as it suggests, of 9 qualifications, but they don't necessarily have to be GCSEs. We've discussed this regionally, and that there's really significant variance from school to school on GCSE and non-GCSE exams that make up the capped 9. So across the region, I think it goes from about 10% in one school of non-GCSE qualifications to over 50% in some schools. So that makes it really difficult when you're trying to compare groups of schools or results across schools, because you're not necessarily measuring the same thing. In discussions with Estin, they don't put that much onus on the thirds within the capped 9 or the capped 9 results because of the variance here. They're more focused on the literacy, numeracy and science results. So it's not that we're not paying attention to the capped 9, but our focus is much more on literacy, numeracy and science outcomes because of the variance between schools of what constitutes the capped 9.
Thank you for that. That takes us to Councillor Simon's question 16. Nick.
Good morning. The report, this is paragraph 4.28. In the report, it states that the food schools need to further engage with targeted support across a wide range of aspects, including teaching and learning, leadership and subject-specific support. Are there any concerns around the engagement levels of the relevant schools?
Yeah, I'll start with this. Largely this links with Estin outcomes again. So we've got, as you're probably aware, it's in the public domain, we've got 2 schools, or 1 school and 1 setting, which are currently in an Estin category of significant improvement. One is the PRU, and one is Aberystwyth. In both instances, we're very happy, as we've already talked about the PRU and their engagement and the progress they're making. But equally with Aberystwyth, we're really happy with the engagement from them in terms of accessing support. They're very much on the front foot. They've got a very strong and experienced school improvement partner, and they've got a very strong partner school working with them, who are offering the support at various subject levels, but also within leadership. So we're happy with the support that's being offered, Councillor, and we're happy with the engagement that those 2 settings are showing around that. Karen, I don't know if there's more from you.
Yeah, also to say we have our own professional learning partners within LACIS, so subject expertise, and where these schools aren't engaging or where we know they need that targeted support, we'll also adopt our planned teach review model, which means we will send our curriculum partners in to work with identified staff in those schools where we know perhaps some aspects of their teaching and learning needs to be improved, and that's a really supportive model. It's working alongside teachers, helping them to think about what they're offering their children, the learning experiences, whether there's the right level of challenge, actually teaching alongside them and then evaluating it so that they get in the habit of self-evaluating their own teaching practices, and through that we see quite rapid improvements in the quality of teaching and learning. But where we know schools aren't engaging particularly well, we do make that part and parcel of either our professional discussions or our team around the school, and we will ask the questions, what is not there for you, or what, we think maybe you would benefit from this. Can we persuade you, or can we ask you to consider, engaging in these things? So we do monitor where schools aren't really engaging in professional learning, and then we will have those follow-up conversations about whether there is anything particular and specific that we're not yet providing that they need.
Is that both for primary and secondary?
Yeah, absolutely. It's for all schools. Yeah, we will monitor all schools.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Question 17 goes on to Appendix 2, which is a summary of key stage 4 outcomes. And it's question 17 to Councillor Keith, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to Appendix 2, paragraphs 1.30 and 1.34. All schools in Torfaen have a higher contribution made by literature, rather than language, and by mathematics rather than numeracy. Is there any particular reason for this, or is this the same regionally and or nationally? Did you get that?
I heard that question. It's a table that's in there for monitoring purposes, really, in terms of the balance that schools take in terms of the measure, in terms of what contributes the most. Is it either English language or is it English literature? Same with numeracy and maths. With the language one in particular, as a parent, you would probably want your child to be making sure that they achieve the language first rather than literature. I'm not in any way denigrating English literature in saying that, but in terms of life chances, access to the next stage of education, you want the language right. Therefore, all it is there is a monitor to check that schools are not getting that measure, and it alludes to what Andrew was talking about earlier, didn't it, in terms of schools being able to perhaps push the literature because it might be perceived as a slightly easier qualification, but it doesn't benefit the learners. It's just a check and balance, that's all it is there for, and the pattern is not concerning in this, in that they are all very close in terms of that qualification. If there were big gaps is what you would be looking at, and it is a pattern that is similar nationally.
Thank you.
Can I just also add to that, and I know Ed knows this, but in terms of when it comes to deciding which one is the measured one, it's the best of, so it can be either, and generally it's the one that is highest. So most schools give access to both, but in terms of the thing that gets reported around performance measurement, it's the one that's the highest.
Okay, thank you for that. Question 18, John Cunningham.
My question relates to 1.44. In relation to achieving 5 or more A-star and A grades, Westmorland schools saw a very large improvement between 24 and 25. Was there a specific reason for this that can be shared as best practice, or was it simply down to cohort?
So I think you've hit a really important nail on the head there, Mr. Cunningham. It often is down to cohort specificness, and sometimes we see that, especially with the volatility in one of the other schools where they've gone up and down over the last 2 years. It has been down to cohort. That said, Westmont really do provide a fantastic education for their children, and we've seen that in terms of the outcomes for this year, and that's built on some previous outcomes as well, which were quite strong. So they've done really well this year. We're keen to work with the school to understand what it is that they've done. We know that they've done some really good targeted work around free school meal pupils and working with them and supporting them. So we want to understand. We've got some initial feedback. They've already been to, we've been with them on several occasions, team around the school meetings, but they've also presented in various different forums, in particular the attendance forum, where they've talked about how they work with and engage their children, specifically those in year 10 and 11 in preparation for GCSEs. And we've shared that across other schools. It's really some really effective practice. And that was also picked up as part of their Eston inspection. It was about 18 months ago now. So, yeah, we want to learn and share, and they are in front of sharing some of that information.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. It's another opportunity to push attendance here. Those schools that have got higher outcomes have higher rates of attendance, and that's why we're encouraging strong school attendance right from the off, because learners get better outcomes.
Thank you for that. Question 19, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Relating in the Appendix 2 to paragraph 1.54, what approaches are being used in order to close the gap between the outcomes of males and females in Trelfyn, and is the gender gap for EFSM and ALM pupils similar to the overall gap?
In terms of what are we doing about the gap has been unfortunately consistent for a little while in terms of a male and female with the gender gap. What are we trying to do about it? The teaching and learning strategy that I talked about previously a couple of questions ago, the idea that we don't want to have a separate ALN strategy and teaching strategy, that the two things should be one and the same, and that they talk to the individual needs of the pupils, and that we raise aspirations for all pupils boys, girls, EFSM. That's really, really important to us. Within our teaching and learning strategy, we've developed case studies based on best practice in different schools, from across primary schools and secondary schools, to share and encourage schools to look at and then learn from. On top of that, the thematic reports that LACIS carry out for us, working with schools, again, to look at really good practice around literacy or numeracy that we've done in the past couple of years, some of the work around cluster work, which has been done over the autumn term. What are schools focusing on there to develop those strategies to tackle those specific gaps that we see? The FSM one, again, it's a national one. We talked about it yesterday with head teachers and Welsh Government. We're trying to learn what works and what doesn't work, but it's a very difficult gap to close and has proven so over the last 10 years. That's not just Torfaen, that is across Wales and that's across the UK.
Supplementary. So in those sorts of discussions, I appreciate that the picture here then probably is very similar across Wales, but when you're having these discussions, does anybody else to sort of come up with any quite innovative things that they think might work in their areas?
Yeah, this isn't actually linked to teaching and learning, but it is linked to what Westmont have been doing, and it goes back to the 5 A stars scenario. Their targeted work that they've done with groups of EFSM learners, very passively, that other children wouldn't know, they've done it in a way that's very sensitive, has got a demonstrable effect on their outcomes, and it's about relationships between pupils and members of staff who work with these small groups, understanding what are some of the challenges, the little things, getting out of bed on time in the morning, getting to school, the travel element, building a bit more resilience. They've done some really innovative and interesting work around that, that we've been able to share with other schools through the attendance forum. That's going to have an impact on there. So if we can share that practice a bit wider, which was what we're doing, hopefully, we might see some of that gap reduce. But it's a wicked and complex problem that we've been trying to tackle again for 25 years, and some progress has been made. I mean, this year we've seen EFSM outcomes increase, but at the same time we've seen non-EFSM outcomes increase. So whilst everybody's gone up, the gap's actually got a bit bigger.
It's good to know that it's still being looked at, though. That it's still being taken seriously. And people
it is, and we've also got the HDRC working within Torfaen, and it's one of the big topics. In fact, after this, we're going into a meeting to start working with HDRC, looking at the FSM gap, poverty strategies, things that we can, again, look at what's working well and just share that learning across the authority and trying to close that gap. That inequality gap is an absolute key driver for us.
It was mentioned in one of our school visits, the increase in the child poverty is quite substantial, and what people are living like and having to cope with. So this comes to the final question, and it's a general one from me. What are the key risks for the next academic year, and how do we mitigate these risks?
I'll start. Attendance is still going to be a key risk for us. We know that it is gradually improving. We've been to Scrutiny for the last 3 years talking about the strategies that we've taken and some of the impact that that's had, and the good partnership working again between the local authority, LACIS and schools in mitigating some of that. But that is still a significant issue for us, and one that, as the campaign says, if you're not in school, you miss out. And you miss out on not just learning and teaching, but you miss out on that broad range of wonderful experiences that schools can offer. So that is absolutely a concern or an issue that we're keeping on the boil and monitoring. In terms of what are we doing about it, it's that ongoing review of strategy, again, working with schools, sharing best practice. I think we've all got a big role to play in that. So I think school governors, elected members, officers, pushing the positives about why we need to be in school and the benefits of being in school is really, really important, and what school can offer, and lifelong learning elements. So that certainly is one of many.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I just think that the national priorities are attendance, literacy, numeracy, and learner well-being. I just think we just need to keep that in our mind as keep the main thing the main thing. There is challenge with the introduction of new GCSEs. This is additional workload for schools, changes in ways of working. Although finances are actually really strong in Torfaen within schools, that is a challenge nationally, particularly with our finances linked to ALN. But ultimately, attendance, literacy and numeracy, let's just keep our focus on that. Good teaching and learning and strong experiences within schools.
At the risk of possibly being controversial, I think linked with attendance there as well, nationally and locally, we're seeing a rise in elective home education. And whilst that's got a place for some learners and some families, that does cause me some concern, I think, in terms of the next 12 months, because we're seeing a rise, but also, I guess, generational. And if we see a continued rise, how that's going to impact upon outcomes over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like I say, whilst there is a place for some learners, I think that there's an issue and a challenge for us in terms of the rise nationally and locally that we're seeing on that.
Well, that concludes our questions for today. Thank you very much. Can I thank the executive member and officers for their time and contributions to the meeting, and ask if they'd like to leave the meeting now and get on with the next meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Thanks. Members, can I please remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. We'll give it a couple of minutes just to... Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye. Bye. May I remind members what's been asked of the Scrutiny Committee to consider when coming up with their recommendations. Members have been invited to offer recommendations to the Executive Member on the development of pupil standards and offer recommendations for the Executive Member on progressing the middle tier review recommendations. Do members have any specific recommendations that they would like to make on this report?
Yes, Chair. Okay.
Can I ask Geraint to come in first?
No,
all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Janet Jones, come in then with your recommendation.
I'm concerned about the inability under question 7 to recruit SIP's lead. Seems as for 2 years they've been trying to get a lead for this and without success. So what are the obstacles in them recruiting in this area?
Yeah, Councillor Jones, that's a question you're asking. Obviously, the officers have left. Do you want to turn that into a recommendation that we can?
Yes, please. I get the wording right, but I leave that to you. But I think that we should really, as a recommendation, that we try exhaust all possibilities for recruitment of a specialist.
Yeah, okay. They did obviously mention that they were looking at alternatives. So I don't know whether you just did you want me to sort of acknowledge within the recommendation document the work that they do? Yeah. I can put it more as a comment rather than a specific recommendation.
That would be brilliant, please.
Yeah, I've got one on the SIPs, and they did mention that there was no standardised assessment across Wales. I think we could recommend, that we just literally ask the executive member to take this to Welsh Government, and it would be a lot easier if everybody was working to the same hymn sheet and there was a standardised assessment process.
Are you referring to the framework?
Yeah, question 4 I was talking.
Yeah,
I picked that, yeah.
Practice rather than assessment, yeah. I'm not sure if this is a recommendation. There's something that I noted here about the reporting on post-16 education. And I wonder if there is something that we can explore in terms of a recommendation.
I jotted down a possibility around that. I was going to raise that, see if any members wanted to turn that into a recommendation. Obviously, they said that they're going to have a members' seminar in the coming months, and that there was. Let me look at it. Yeah, I've got. They acknowledged there was room for development, and I think it was the strategic directors meet for each of the authorities, a meeting with colleague Gwen, aren't they? But yeah, you could as a recommendation, sort of acknowledge that work and recommend that they proceed and report back to you with its progress or something.
That was my question. Is it at a stage of a recommendation, or do we need to wait for that members' seminar first? So I wasn't sure if there's like a staged approach to this. You agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I sort of flagged it as well, but they said they're very much, and they recognise it, but they're in the early stages of developing it. So if we get the members' seminar, and then we sort of put it for visioning at some point in the future, I think.
The question with Janet was about succession planning, I think, as well. I got that marked out.
Yeah.
Okay, the other one...
I was just wondering, with my question I asked in 4.28, it was more referring to teacher, but, I mean, with that, in mind, teaching assistants provide a backbone for our schools. Couldn't they be included in this as well, with support?
I think you're getting into specifics there that are outside of the sort of scrutiny report.
I know I should have asked it as a question, but
yeah. Anna, you've got your hand up. Councillor Jones, Janet Jones.
Sorry,
Your hand is up.
Sorry, it's just an observation regarding one of the last questions about the grading and how, yes, we are impressed that Westmont has got a really good cohort this year, but it doesn't make us feel quite uneasy that Abersacan has a high area of pupils in deprivation, and this relates to the when we visited Garnteg last week, because those children who are in deprivation, they are going to be probably going into Abersacan, and I felt that we should be doing more to support improving grades in Abersacan Comp and how we go about that. I know they've got the SIPs and they've got the leaders, but for us who live in north of the borough, including Councillor Mark Jones, I think it's a concern that we have. It may just be an observation.
Yeah, obviously I don't go too much into specifics of schools as such, but I did jot down question 18, I think you're referring to, where obviously they were talking about the fairly high improvements at Westmont, and they were looking at sharing of best practice. I can turn that into a recommendation, if you like, that sort of focuses on specifically equivalent schools in terms of preschool meal, poverty, etc.
That would be great. Thanks very much.
I think that's quite a moot point, actually, because I was going to raise that they've singled out Westmont. But I think because of the history of Westmont, is it, that they've improved. Other schools who are achieving this anyway have been consistent throughout the piece, haven't they? And so there has been an improvement. They've maintained their status. But Westmont did improve in that year, didn't they? Yeah. But I think that's a good idea that... oh, absolutely. But I think that's a good recommendation from Carrington.
I've got one on the last point about the IOTAs, because we did look at it, but it is a risk, apparently, from Jason O'Brien. He's concerned about the rise across Wales, really, of education of children at home, not in school.
Did you say you had a recommendation about it?
Yeah, I think it's to monitor and to actually highlight to Welsh Government the concerns of the rise in IOTAS pupils and the next generation.
Do you mean, are you referring to the
educated other than in school? Yeah.
He was referring to home education, specifically
home ed.
Yeah.
All right. I thought he was
referring to.
Okay, I missed the point.
Do you still want me to?
Well, I think there is a risk there, and it will relate to results in future generations, won't it? So.
I also asked, in the question that Colette asked, and I introduced the free school meals issue, Andrew said, I'll talk to you about that after. Would it be a good idea, you mentioned that report you were talking about now, Gareth, including free school meals into that?
Yeah,
into that question, because...
Surely if we're looking at catering, free school meals is going
Yeah.
to be
well, it's on our next.
Another question I need to ask then. If you're going to look at catering within schools, not the Torvine doesn't provide catering for all schools.
Yeah,
so
we're going
We're on the next meeting.
Slightly off topic, but when it comes to that meeting, I will send a report pro forma to members to have any input in before it goes to the officers.
Which report is on about?
When it comes to that.
The next,
But Andrew offered, I think Andrew offered to supply you with some information around your question with the free school meals, wasn't it? So do you want me to put that as an action?
Yes, because I didn't know whether I thought you would supply the committee, not me.
Yeah, it'll come to. Yeah, I'll send it on to the whole committee, but it was in response to the conversation you were sort of having with him.
Yes, Can I ask Garen to go through anything that we haven't picked up now, unless anybody else has got anything to raise?
Just on my question about the training, Governor training, just to further progress the cluster training, please.
That was the only one left on my list, members. It was around the training. Obviously, they explained that the poor attendance for the training sessions referred to in the report were additional training. And I didn't know whether you wanted a recommendation that for any future training of the sort of the LA level training, like that additional layer that he was referring to, any future training of that they consider the format of it and potentially follow the cluster model that's been very successful.
Can I just ask on that, on the training that the LEA provides, does that go through EAS?
Yeah.
Are they the ones who notify us of the training?
Yeah.
Yes.
Any further recommendations from anyone? No? Okay. Geraint will put those together and get them out to us. So the agenda item 7 is the date of the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 26th of March. Thank you very much for your attendance. I now close and thank all members for their attendance. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.